No. I'm saving you for the other video.
We open with Laura catching Minory gazing at a slightly familiar publication, and not too surprisingly, it turned out to be the story she wrote back during her time as a part of the literature club. So yeah, thankfully this was going to be a Minory episode, but the follow-up to all of that would have to wait, as this was also the requisite cultural festival episode.
Everybody gets one.
Granted, Minory would still play a significant role here, managing the Tropical Club's booth where she would share their research about makeup. Alongside that, the club would also give a few pointers on how to apply the stuff.
Oh yeah, that sounds like a great idea. Though, isn't makeup against your school rules?
Yeah, for an episode that, as we'll soon see, has a ton of continuity throughout, this does feel like a massive oversight. Now, I could accept the idea of them stretching the rules for the cultural festival where things tend to be a lot more casual, but they never clarified this in the episode, so I do have to consider it a bit of a plot hole. Anyway, in order to apply the makeup, they naturally needed a dresser of some sort, so they decided to make their own for the occasion.
And yet, y'all are still gonna charge 6,000 to 7,000 yen for it. Capitalism at its finest, folks.
With that, Minory had secured her jobs for the festival, mostly just working behind the scenes as usual, but of course Laura knew something was off with her. Thus later that night, while they were boiling some fish, she recollected all of the times Minory had tried to hide her work, including her debut and the body switching episodes.
While his first episode was nothing all that great in my opinion, I am at least glad that Hiroyuki Yoshino has seemed to settle into his role as a writer for the show by clearly doing his homework.
Minori's writing has been a plotline that has unfortunately been left hanging for the longest time, so it is great that we are finally getting some payoff with some good callbacks no less. It is a little late for this stuff, but it's still appreciated nonetheless. With that, we skipped ahead 27 days, to the final days of the setup for the festival. During all of this, the school broadcast team made another return.
Honestly, all of these callbacks and plot progression would normally be something saved for the main writer of the show, but come on, this is the guy who wrote Code Geass. I think he deserves at least this much authority.
Anyway, they were interviewing the judo club, who were setting up a grilled squid stand complete with a mascot they had rented for the day, or so they thought, as apparently the company had run out of squid costumes. I'm guessing both Toei and Daiei needed them that day. So instead, they had to settle for a dude in a crab costume.
Huh, I wonder who they got for the job.
Anyway, this gave the Tropical Club an opportunity to set up a live interview for the day of the festival, as well as let Laura inquire about Minori's past with the literature club from a former classmate. And we didn't learn much new, other than that she suddenly quit the club, inspired by writing some allegedly interesting stories. Not a bad setup for later in this episode, though I do wish Manatsu had been the one to ask about this, rather than the mermaid who's gotten the sea lion's share of development so far. The day of the festival arrived, with the Tropical Club's attraction proving to be successful, especially their little dresser that they held onto for a little bit, but I'm sure that won't become significant later. However, Manatsu and Laura ended up getting pulled away when their homeroom's crate booth was short on hands. To make matters more complicated, the broadcast duo had arrived for the interview. Without any available talkers, it seemed like they would have to reschedule, but Minori of all people volunteered. Granted, Little Miss backstage needed some encouragement, so she put some makeup on.
Oh yeah, that is a major theme of the show, isn't it? Silly me, how could I ever forget?
But yeah, the interview went well, with her friends quietly acknowledging her growth in a really nice scene. And yeah, her makeup was cute. I certainly like it better than all of her teammates. During all of this, Chongi had arrived to launch an attack, but ended up losing the Yaneda ball. What's more, he was mistaken for the crab suit guy by the judo club. Still, I guess being a professional, he just decided to do his job without any real question.
Actually, shouldn't you be against cooking up seafood since, you come from the sea? Isn't this like that one Robot Chicken sketch?
Krabby Patties are made out of crab!
But yeah, I guess this could also be seen as character development for the villain, which might even lead into him hesitating to launch an attack, or maybe not.
Well, that was pointless.
This resulted in the Precure somehow doing a group transformation even though half of them were on the roof while the other half were on the ground. How's that work?
Well, you got me. By all accounts, it doesn't make sense.
Well, if anything, the fight this week was at least better than average for this show, with the grilled squid monster taking almost full advantage of its anatomy. If it went all the way, I think we'd all be in trouble.
Oh, come on. That's not what it should look like.
But yeah, during the fight, it managed to capture everyone except Mimory, which proved to be a big mistake, especially when it started hopping on her old books. This led to her launching her finisher, which yes, I'm saying with the biggest air quotations possible, because of course the actual finishing blow went to Laura for what, the 10th time now?
You know what? I'm actually curious. Let's see here. When did Lemaire originally debut? Episode 17, so 16 minus this episode's 28, that equals 12. We've seen the same victory 12 times in a row. Man, that new finisher could have come any sooner.
Anyway, we just kind of transitioned to the lair of the witch with no real establishing shots like Chonge retreating or something. Yeah, unfortunately, the pace of this episode is a little all over the place, but we'll get more into that later. For now, they seem to be experiencing some earthquakes, which of course would be common around Japan, but the cause of this wasn't the Ring of Fire, but rather...
Gee, what kind of nightmares could she be having?
He is Aquaman, and he just became King of Atlantis.
Oh, well, that makes a lot of sense. I'm sorry I asked.
Jokes aside, this was at least another significant plot development, as apparently her nightmares were because of a lack of motivation energy. Back with the Precure, Laura finally asked Minoru why she left the literature club, and as it turned out, it wasn't because of any real animosity between any of the parties involved, but rather because, surprisingly, Minoru had a bit of an ego. Yeah, apparently she showed her first draft of her story to her seniors with the full intent of then sending it to a professional publisher. Obviously, not only was that a little far-fetched, but they also pointed out how her writing was full of derivatives of characters and plot points from other well-known work.
Which, yeah, I think that is a common trap for writers.
I mean, granted, I haven't written a lot of stories myself outside of a few school assignments, but I have proofread some of my friends' stuff, and yeah, often they just outright stole characters and stories from anime we had seen. They took it well because they knew it needed work to become its own thing, but Minoru ended up falling into that writing pitfall without even realizing it. And she couldn't deny this fact even when Manatsu tried to sonakotonai her.
It's honestly a habit that I wish Hollywood would break, but we can't hope for miracles.
Also, while this was likely a development they were planning to do with Minoru from the very beginning, I can't help but wonder if Hiroyuki Yoshino has also had such experiences, especially after kind of repeating plotlines from Code Geass into Guilty Crown, but I digress. Anyway, embarrassed of letting her ego run wild, Minoru resigned from the literature club and writing altogether. However, the episode ended on a hopeful note with her admitting that the Tropical Club and makeup had restored some of her confidence, helped by the fact that during the interview she emulated a certain overly confident fish.
Oh, thank God, we've broken out of that pattern of mostly pointless filler episodes and actually got a really enjoyable one with plenty of continuity. Of the characters in this show, well, really all of them, minus Laura, were in need of development, but I'm still glad it went to Minoru. It is just satisfying to learn why she had a falling out with the literature club, though I do also kind of wish we could have gotten this a lot sooner. That aside, I am thankful that this does seem to be a soft reset for the show, as we are starting to build towards an actual main plot now.
For better and for worse, this was a packed episode where we did get to see a lot of good character development for Minoru, good callbacks, and finally some progression for the main plot, complete with some good, if a little blatant, foreshadowing. That said, it would be hard for anyone to try and stuff all of that into about 23 minutes. as a result, several scenes felt like they lacked some proper transitions and build-up, in particular everything involving Chongye. Still, I do think Yoshino did what he could, essentially doing cleanup with this episode, even reiterating the importance of makeup in the show. And that final scene was unquestionably fantastic, I'd imagine especially for more creative types who have come to realize when their writing was a little overly derivative. I do wish Manatsu had been the one to question Minori about her past, as we've gotten more than enough of Laura at this point, though at least next week seems like it's going to be an episode about her. So overall, while this wasn't an outstanding episode outside of that final scene, it does at least feel like this show's main plot is getting back on track. Hopefully, like Minori, they'll start drafting more than one script at a time.
Last week, I didn't upload a Wednesday video because honestly I need a little break to recharge as well as work on the Toy Trinity video a little. I think it was certainly worth it as I did need to collect my thoughts, especially for a video like this, and I definitely think I made the right choice of splitting it into two because this is going to be a long one. Still look forward to a list where I try to narrow down what I believe to be the best leads of Precure, Super Sentai, and Kamen Rider. Hopefully it should be out later this week along with the return of the Wednesday videos. And until then though, farewell for now my friends, and yeah, I better go help him. You know, maybe I should consider doing that whole spinning sign thing.